Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This Honorable Superior Court for the County of Wake is now convened and sitting for this special ceremonial session. The Honorable Judge Brian Collins, present and presiding. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. God save this state and this honorable court.
Welcome to this special ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court. I'm Brian Collins, resident Superior Court Judge for Wake County. The Wake County Bar has a long tradition of gathering together in special ceremonial session to honor and celebrate the lives of our colleagues who have passed recently. Thank you for allowing us to do that. It means a lot to us, and we enjoy learning about your loved one and understanding their contributions to our legal system and to our community. And with that, I'll pass it on to our Master of Ceremonies.
My name is Russell Babb. I'm the president of the 10th Judicial District Bar. On behalf of the more than 6,000 members of the 10th, I want to thank each of you for joining us today. It's always difficult when we lose a colleague or a loved one, and it's our hope that this video will celebrate our colleagues' lives and remember them fondly.
Your Honor, Mr. President, members of the bar, friends, and family, a warm and heartfelt greetings to you all. My name is Brian Oten, and along with Deontay Thomas, I serve as the co-chair to the Memorials Committee for the 10th Judicial District Bar. On behalf of the members of the committee, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for what will be a very special session of Superior Court. The Wake County Bar is a special place. I hear people say this often, and I'm happy to say that I've observed it myself. There's a sense of community here in Wake County, an undercurrent of respect and collegiality. And we've seen this play out over the past 18 months, where lawyers faced with new restrictions, stresses, and responsibilities in their personal and professional lives due to this pandemic have responded to each other not with anger and not with disregard for the person, but instead with kindness, flexibility, and grace. We've all had to adapt to this new world, and these special memorial sessions are no exception. These special sessions are one of the primary contributors to our community of lawyers. They are integral to the fabric of our bar. And although this session may look different than those past, it is critical that we continue in our efforts to stop and to remember the individuals that made a difference in this community and in our personal lives. I always walk away from these sessions feeling encouraged and inspired about our profession and our community. And I hope that is your experience today. To that end, I want to express our sincere thanks to the families of our honorees for allowing us as a local bar to recognize their loved ones in this manner. For those who have previously attended these special sessions, my words will sound familiar, but I do believe they bear repeating. Today, although we are not physically together, we are collectively joined in spirit for this unique and important opportunity. An opportunity to gather, not to mourn, but to remember some incredible members of our legal community, to honor their contributions to our profession, perhaps even to share a laugh with a funny memory or learn something new about someone that we've known for some time. And most importantly, to reflect upon and be inspired by the tremendous impact that these individuals had not only on our professional lives, but our personal lives as well.
Paul Allen Sheridan passed away on April 12, 2019, after a short but valiant fight with a glioblastoma, or two. Paul didn't just love life, he adored it. He lived every minute to the fullest. For those who did not have the privilege of knowing Paul, and since this is supposed to be a short memorial for Paul Sheridan, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do him justice. There is no way to encapsulate his larger-than-life extroverted personality with all of its nuances in just a few minutes. So I won't try. Instead, I'm going to tell a few stories about Paul and hope they capture something of this incredible father, lawyer, and all-around wonderful human being. Paul and his older two boys, Will and Ryan, were riding dirt bikes, please insert in Arizona or in North Carolina, when the rest of that story will have something to do with wiping out, injuring themselves, either going to the hospital or as likely as not, and not only living to tell about it, but to laugh about it and add to the long, colorful list of adventures on those bikes and the fun those boys had repairing themselves and the bikes. Paul standing in front of Judge Fullwood, absolutely mortified because Paul had been summoned and came directly from mowing his yard, having no idea why he was there. He was there because the pro se litigant had been acting in a manner the judge did not appreciate. So the judge had Paul summoned so that the judge could resolve the issue, then apologize to Paul for having had to bother him. Paul, hanging upside down in his wrecked pickup truck, as rescue workers extricate him, then demanding that a sheriff's deputy locate and take possession of his trial case until someone from the office could get to Winston-Salem to pick it up. Paul, with his daughter Savannah, in their seats on the glass at the Hurricanes game. When Eric Stahl scores a hat trick, Eric Stahl retrieves the puck, tosses it over the glass to Savannah. I don't remember why, but that puck is currently in my office on a bookshelf, but it's there. The smile on Paul's face as he lay in a hospital bed at Duke after chemotherapy and as it became evident that the end was drawing near. He was still very appreciative of the birthday gift he got that was a bunch of Jerks t-shirt and a hat. Paul at a Habitat for Humanity home build, melding two of the things nearest and dearest to his heart, building things and hanging out with members of the construction law section of the North Carolina Bar Association. Paul talking about his love for the U.S. Virgin Islands, especially St. John, his true happy place. Paul talking about each of his 4 children, Will, Ryan, Savannah, and Blake, and some adventure they had shared or something one of the kids had achieved. Paul was a lawyer's lawyer. He was a professional, he was zealous, he was smart as a whip, he was a problem solver and really good at his profession. He was a wonderful general contractor, whether with his father's business in the heart of Manhattan or his own company building houses in the desert in Arizona. He was an incredible law partner, a friend, and one of the best human beings I have had the privilege of knowing. He also was severely time challenged. When a client showed up at the office unexpectedly, Paul was always 5 minutes from the office. I learned to ask him where he was so I could figure out his time to target. Or he would tell the paralegals, "I'll be back in a few minutes," and never return. With Paul, time was an approximation because life was an adventure, and opportunities were not allowed to slip by. There's not a day that goes by that I do not wish Paul was here to help me solve some challenge, whether in the law, in a construction project, or concerning a car. On behalf of my law partner, Chad Cochran, we appreciate the opportunity to share a glimpse into the life well lived but cut way too short.
Hi, my name is Patti Bartis. I am honored to speak in commemoration of my dear friend and law partner, Cindy Wittmer. Cindy and I practiced law together for 24 years at Parker Poe. In 2018, Parker Poe had a party to celebrate Cindy's retirement from the firm. I wrote a little story about Cindy at that time, and I'd like to share it again now. Once upon a time, there was an unlikely litigator. She was diminutive in size, but prodigious in intellect, work ethic, and spirit. When the unlikely litigator graduated from law school, she did not resemble most of the other litigators of the time. To begin with, most of them were taller than 5'1" and weighed more than 100 pounds. The unlikely litigator was reserved and soft-spoken. The other litigators had loud horns that they tooted whenever possible. Notwithstanding significant adversity in her life, the unlikely litigator was always hopeful. Many of the other litigators were jaded and cynical. The unlikely litigator gave birth to 2 children to whom she was completely devoted. Most of the other litigators didn't have the plumbing required for that. The unlikely litigator always put the needs of others before her own and sought no recognition for her good deeds. Few of the other litigators did this. All those differences notwithstanding, the unlikely litigator had a number of distinct advantages over her opponents. She was smarter, She was better prepared. She was intensely competitive, and she was way tougher than she looked. As a result, her opponents often underestimated her, to their detriment. Now, it must be said that the unlikely litigator worked at a firm with a disproportionately high share of other unlikely litigators. I was fortunate to join that firm and have the privilege of working with Cindy Wittmer, the unlikely litigator. Cindy taught me a lot about being a lawyer. She taught me legal writing and oral advocacy skills, but she showed me that you don't have to be rude, showy, or male to be an effective litigator. More importantly, though, by spending time with Cindy, I learned what really matters. It's not plaques on the wall. It is not how much money you have in the bank. It is not being the center of attention. Cindy taught me that what really matters is loyalty, generosity, and integrity. I was so fortunate to be Cindy's law partner and friend. I miss Cindy every day, but cherish the memories I have of her and the intangible gifts she gave to me.
Bill, I'm glad to be here with you
Likewise,
to
Steve.
talk about our friend Chris. I thought maybe I'd start out by telling you and the folks here about the first time I met Chris, which I vividly remember. I was with the Attorney General's office at the time, and it was just shortly before you joined the Attorney General's office, probably 1980. And I was out on the Fayetteville Street Mall standing at the top of the mall between the Court of Appeals building and the Supreme Court building, you're right across from the Capitol. And Chris Brewer was out there. And, what I just vividly remember about him was this guy with this huge and infectious grin. Just a particularly outgoing and gracious guy. And I've just simply never forgotten that. One of the first things we ought to talk about is the fact that he really was a lawyer's lawyer.
Absolutely. All three of us, Chris and both of us, came through the Attorney General's office. Of course, Chris was there for a whole career. He was there, I guess, 30 years. But then he joined our firm. And I remember him bringing his analytical mind to apply to a different regulatory statute or scheme. He'd worked with several in the AG's office, but I was heavily involved in another. And I just remember his acute analysis of issues that brought a whole new perspective to the work and a case that we were working on together. He just had a really incisive mind and was a real, as Steve said, a real lawyer's lawyer, thoroughly prepared. You've told stories about some of his cross-examination outlines that you've seen when you worked with him that were, just stellar. So he was just a really thoroughly prepared and thoroughly engaged lawyer on behalf of his clients, whether it was the state or in private practice.
When Bill says they were stellar cross-examination outlines, what I at least was referring to is the fact that he could get 600 or 700 or 800 words, on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, in little blocks in different colors with circles around them and things highlighted in various colors and arrows drawn from, and that was his working from stuff that was written so small I probably couldn't have read it. He still did a really fine job cross-examining people.
Yeah.
And he did have that analytical mind, and he had that wonderful thoroughness. And
he had a real pleasant interaction too with the people that he was working with, not just clients, but also opposing lawyers. And
right.
You have a story about that, I think.
Just that he was a really, thoughtful and decent guy. And the story that Bill's referring to is after I'd left the Attorney General's office, and Chris had gone on to run the Medicaid fraud unit for the Attorney General's office, and was chasing, doctors and dentists and pharmacists and hospitals that were either abusing or cheating the Medicaid program. And I was in private practice, and I was defending some of these people. I got a phone call from him.
None of whom were guilty.
Mine weren't. But I got a phone call from him out of the blue. And he wanted to know if I could help a guy that he'd prosecuted. He said that the fella had been in trouble with Medicaid, but he took it. Chris thought he was a good guy who could be trusted back into the program. And he'd been debarred, which means he's out of the Medicaid program, and he wanted back in. And Chris said, hey, can you help this guy? Now, I don't think most prosecutors are going out of their way to, help the people they prosecuted, get back into the system. But that was a phone call from Chris. And if I may, just to bring this back away from the law and back into his everyday life, his daughter, Carrie, had spent time in Tanzania, in Africa, and came back wanting to do something for the kids that she'd worked with there. And so she and Chris organized a little foundation, which over a course of about 10 years, raised money that helped put, 10, 12, 15 Tanzanian teenagers and young adults through secondary school, and some of them through some post-secondary education. A couple of them became teachers. I mean, they had their own little mini, Peace Corps, and and that was Chris. I mean, he saw the world, beyond the courtroom, beyond Wake County, beyond North Carolina.
Yeah, and he was a real treasure in our firm too, in terms of his interaction with all his colleagues, all his attorney peers, of course, but also the staff. Chris was famous for bringing cut flowers from the garden, home-baked goods, remembering birthdays, and also every Christmas he would arrange to get newly minted silver dollars that could be put in kids' stockings, children or grandchildren or whatever. So there was just a constant thread of thoughtfulness and consideration for other people that would just ran through everything he did in his day-to-day interactions. Go ahead.
Can I close with one thing? Among all of his other qualities, the guy had a fascination, almost a fetish with stuff, and among other things, he had a dime store steak knife stuck in the air conditioning vent in his automobile, and I don't know why. I mean, to cut his seatbelt, to carve an apple, beats me. But that knife was in that vent for years, and that was Chris. Yeah. He was prepared for every eventuality.
I think one vivid memory I have of him is just that he was a runner for years and years and years, and he had that long runner's stride. If you were walking down the hall beside him, I'm 6 feet tall, and I could barely keep up with him with that stride. That, and also that laugh that would just erupt at a moment's notice if something amusing came up in terms of something we were dealing with a client, or even an opposing lawyer sometimes. That came up every once in a while. So Chris was a gentleman and an excellent attorney and a great colleague.
And we're honored to be able to talk to other people about him for a few minutes today, and thanks for the opportunity to do that.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Tom Worth, and it is my honor today to speak in behalf of my old friend and colleague, Walter Brian Howell, known to me as Brian or simply as Uncle B. As is generally known, Brian graduated from North Carolina State University with a degree in engineering, and then went to the University of North Carolina School of Law, graduated in 1969. In his early years, he practiced corporately and in a small firm, but he morphed into sole practice pretty quickly. He was a superb lawyer. His dedication to detail as a result of his engineering background and his sense of fairness, his zealous pursuit of his clients' causes, and his tremendous work ethic combined to make him a formidable adversary, but always tempered with reasonableness and fairness. In his early years, he was lead counsel in a capital murder case, and he also was very involved in domestic relations. He led single-handedly successful effort to thwart the efforts of the city of Raleigh to impose a road on the garden and home of his client. He subsequently prevented the city from imposing a bridge in Pullen Park. He then moved on into land use practice, and the last 25 years of his almost 50-year career was spent in condemnation-type matters. And it is at this time that he and I associated our respective solo practices in matters involving condemnation. I on the land use side, Brian as the lead litigator. I was always pleased to be second chair in matters in which I was involved with Brian Howell. In the last 10 years of his practice, he associated with his son, Cooper, and in that time, he focused entirely on condemnation. In sum, Brian was a great friend, and he was a very, very fine lawyer and a tribute to the profession. He courageously fought cancer 3 different times in his life, retiring finally in 2017, again under the specter of cancer. But a well-lived life and a superb professional life.
Hello, I'm Josh Hanson, and I am honored to have a few moments to speak about my colleague, my mentor, and my friend, Brian Howell. I only had the pleasure of working with Brian over the last 10 or so years of his life and career. And by the time I started working with Brian, he had already accomplished so much within the practice of law. Some of the highlights Mr. Worth has already touched upon. But you should also know that Brian was a professor, an adjunct professor at North Carolina Central University School of Law, where he taught civil procedure. And he was also the editor of 2 editions of the most preeminent treatise on civil practice and procedure here in North Carolina, that being Shuford's, or as we know it here in our office, Howell Shuford. And in those editions that Brian edited, he made sure in the prefaces to thank his mentors in the law, names like W.C. Harris Jr., Joe Cheshire Jr., Charles Poe, and Samuel Leaguer. He also thanked his friends and colleagues, William Thorpe, Robert Bodie, for their contributions not just to his professional growth, but to his personal growth. And I think that's what I'd like to do most, is talk about how Brian contributed not just to our growth as lawyers, as better practitioners and professionals, but as people. Brian encouraged us to have a good quality of life. And for him, quality of life was based on relationships, his relationships with his friends and his family, his loving wife, Phyllis, his 2 children whom he adored, Brian and Cooper, and the grandchildren who he doted on frequently. And his office was always full of artwork and scribbles and notes and photographs of those grandkids. Brian loved travel and art, something that he's left with us. Most of the art in our office has come from Brian and Phyllis, and we thank them for that. He was a gentleman, he was sincere, and he was authentic. And we miss him every single day in this office, not just for the lessons we learn, not for just tips on practice, but just being able to talk to him. He was caring, he was immersed, he worked hard every day up until he could no longer walk into this office. He was here, first attorney every day. We miss him greatly. He's an outstanding attorney. He's an even better person. And I thank the Wake County Bar Association for the opportunity to have one more chance, to say thank you to Brian. Thank you.
That concludes our program. Thank you to all of our presenters for their thoughtful words and shared memories. I want to thank all of the members of the Memorial Committee, as well as our videographer, Brian Miller of Frontrunner Productions. And a very special and significant thank you goes to the staff of the Wake County Bar and 10th Judicial District. Without their incredible efforts, this excellent presentation would not have been possible. Thank you to Judge Brian Collins for presiding over this session. And lastly, I extend a most sincere thanks to you all for joining us for this special session.
All right, that ends our celebration. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the 10th Judicial District Bar, especially the Memorials Committee of the 10th Judicial District Bar for putting this together. Thank you to all the participants, to the folks who gave the tributes. Thank you for letting us honor your loved ones. It's a very important thing that we do. And with that, this ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court stands adjourned, sine die.